interrupt me if you need to talk to me, like if I disappear or whatever, rather than waving at me because I won't see you.
Yep.
So it's quite a long PowerPoint, but I can get through it fairly quickly. It will be in the folder, so if anybody needs to review any of it, you can just go back and have another look. What we're going to cover in the session today is kind of an overview of the fund. We're going to look at what the key information about it is. We're going to have a look at some of the stuff in the form, the narrative questions you need to look at in the finance document. And then we're going to talk about what support you can get through MVT and the team. So there's actually 3 funds under the Cultural Recovery Fund. In England, it was called the Culture Recovery Fund. So if I give it the wrong name, apologies for that. But I've been talking about the Culture Recovery Fund for about 6 weeks and the Cultural Recovery Fund for about 3 days. So there's actually 3 funds. And we're going to be talking about the Welsh Government Fund today, which is the one that covers music venues. You may know other people who are also going for the Arts Council Wales one, and there is going to be one for freelancers as well. So don't get muddled between those 3 funds. Welsh Government Fund is the one we're looking at. So overview of what the Cultural Recovery Fund is for. It's to protect sustainable organisations and jobs. Jobs is really key to this one. In the English fund, for example, part of what you could apply for is cost for redundancy. You cannot apply for cost for redundancy in the Cultural Recovery Fund because they want to protect jobs. So I'll come in a bit more detail in a minute about exactly what they'll fund. So they want to protect the organisations and they want to protect jobs. So key things to get into your head. The deadline is the 5 p.m. on the 2nd of October, sorry, and it's to cover the period 1st of April 2020 to 31st of March 2021. You can get up to 150,000. It is not to cover your losses, it is to cover the cost to keep you open, essentially. We'll go into the kind of funding side of it in a minute. And there's an online application form, and then we're going to be sending in a cash flow by email as well. I'll go into that again in a bit more detail. There's loads of guidance in the folder, loads of documents, and there's a review process to help you, and again, more detail to follow. So the overview of this fund in terms of what they will fund, there's loads more detail in their guidance documents. But you need to be a recognised organisation within the culture sector in Wales. You need to have 1 year's fully independently certified or audited accounts. You do not need to upload those, but you need to have them. You need to be able to demonstrate that you were financially sustainable in February 2020. And that you've essentially lost a load of income turnover because of the pandemic. Part of the offer, as I said, is about maintaining jobs, and you actually offer condition of your offer that you commit to maintain the employment of those people for a year, and then you've got to align with the cultural contract, which again, there's more information about that online. I won't go into that massively here. So what can you use the funding for? Obviously really important to think about what you can ask for costs for. So it's about your costs up to 31st of March 2021, maintaining your staff and preventing redundancy, so they won't pay redundancy costs. Anything to kind of review or do work to your venue. So for example, it might be things like maybe you needed a health and safety report or something else, so kind of sustainability stuff, removing the threat of insolvency, so any costs that help with that, reopening costs. So if you're preparing to reopen, what might you need? PPE type stuff. Might you need to remake your floor because it's hard to clean? Might you need some new kit in the venue in order to reopen? We'll come back to that one in a bit. And anything about kind of mothballing and things that help you become sustainable and resilient. So actually, do you need to invest in, I don't know, a new business plan or some new marketing or that kind of thing, or something about diversifying your income streams? anything that helps enhance your digital offering. So are you going to live stream? Do you need some equipment to do that? And if you want to put on some events. There's loads more detail about all of these in their guidance and in our information. There's kind of lists against each of these categories, which I won't go into now. So on the application form has sections A to J. I'm just going to talk about E and G today. No, those are the wrong way around. E and F. Somehow I've got those wrong. So I don't know how I've done that. I will update that. So the first kind of 4 sections are just kind of facts and figures. In the guidance, we've laid out some of the things where you just need to double check some of those answers. But I'm mainly going to focus on the narrative section, which is economic and cultural impact, and the finance section, the fund information, where you put your budgets and stuff. Oh, that's gone back one, sorry about that. So there are a whole load of narrative questions which have 500 character limits. 500 characters is not very many words at all, about 80 to 90 words. So you need to be super precise and clear with your answers. Keep your sentences short, they're very powerful and to the point. Feel free to use bullet points, just write a list. But also you do have your cash flow, not management accounts, sorry, that's the previous one, to help tell your story. So we'll come to the cash flow, but you can put more information in there because there's no word limit on that. Little trick that I use is I often use an ampersand instead of an and because it saves you 2 characters. And also do use data and numbers to back up what you say. If you say we're a popular venue, very anecdotal. If you say 3,000 people come to our venue every week, month, year, whatever, those numbers just show that that's a fact, it's not anecdotal. And the questions on this one overlap quite a lot, and we were told very clearly that in some ways it doesn't actually matter what you put in which questions as long as you cover everything. So if something feels like it fits into 2 answers, don't repeat yourself. Use that space to do a different answer. They're going to look at it as a whole. They're not going to mark against each question quite in that way. So the first one is tell us about the organisation you're with or manage, 500 characters. So for me, this is a question where you get to show off and talk about what you're proud of. What do you do? Who do you program? What genres? Do you work in music and other art forms? What do you do? Do you program annual things? And don't forget those numbers. What's your capacity? How many people come to the venue? How many artists do you support? And name people, that always helps give them context. Next question, tell us what would happen if your organisation, if you're no longer able to operate viably. So basically, they want you to include who would look after your organisation's cultural assets. So for an organisation like most of you, that isn't particularly relevant. If the cultural skill or service will be lost, that is relevant to you. And if you provide a statutory duty, not relevant to most of you. So in terms of kind of that second one, what I would encourage you to have a think about is the kind of geographical area that you work in. Is it an area of deprivation or low engagement? So if you weren't there, what would happen to the ability of your local community to engage with music, culture, etc.? How are you different? Why are you different from other local venues? Why is it important to save you? And what would happen if you closed? Not just to the venue, but also your staff, your artists, your audiences. Would they have to travel for 3 hours to get a venue? Would they have to go and get different types of jobs? Would your audiences lose out on the ability to do whatever it is they do in your venue? And what will be lost to the wider community if you close? Many venues obviously don't just put on music, they do all kinds of different things. So what impact will this funding have on the wider cultural sector, 500 characters? Second part to the question, tell us. Notice, by the way, that a lot of these questions have more than 500 characters in the question. Tell us what you have done to enable future productivity, innovation, skills and talent development within your sector. Include data to show the impact of these activities where possible. If you include initiatives which have been planned but not yet started, make this clear in your answer. So what I would think about answering this question is, what does the funding actually allow you to do? What will it kind of allow you to do the great work you're already doing, but will it allow you to do something new? You know, like I mentioned before, live streaming, maybe that's new to you, but that's going to be really important in terms of the wider cultural sector. Have you responded in any innovative ways to the crisis? You know, I know people, venues throughout the country doing things like selling food. Some have opened their doors to the local food bank to use the space to, you know, pack their bags or whatever. You know, what have you done as part of the crisis, and how has that kind of developed your business model, and how does that support the wider cultural sector? How do you support the talent pipeline, and where do you fit in the kind of cultural ecology, not just of your local area, but in Wales? By cultural ecology, funders are talking about kind of the whole cultural landscape, and where do you fit in that? You know, they do know you, but don't presume prior knowledge. So, you know, something that might be really obvious to you will still need to be explained in these questions. And again, use data to back it up. How many people, how many artists, how many shows? What role, keep going, more questions. What role does your organisation play in your local area? Tell us about your work and how you contribute to levelling up your local area, such as local partnerships, any impact you have on economic regeneration, local culture and heritage, and what region of Wales do you cover? So on this one, I would have a think about like who else you support, community groups, artists, charities, like not just in the arts sector. You know, you had your question about the cultural sector. This is kind of more general. Who else do you work with? You know, name those other organisations, education institutions, local groups. How do you achieve that work? Who do you work with? And also, oh, sorry, is this the next question, the one before? Sorry, there's so many questions. What did you in the local area? Right, this is still the same question. And actually, also, do you support any particular disadvantaged groups or unusual genres? You know, do you do work around protected characteristics? Do you support people of different gender, different religion, etc.? And again, give practical answers. How does your organisation contribute to economic growth? Questions keep coming. 500 characters again. So think about this really in the widest sense in terms of economic impact. So how do you as an organisation have an impact in your, you know, like local economic ecology in this one? Do you invest in local creatives, local organisations? Do you work with freelancers? Like if you weren't there, what's the economic hole that will be left? You know, you'd probably have quite a large supply chain. What does that look like if you're not there? And again, practical answers, examples, you know, facts and figures where you can. You spend this much on artists every year, X% of your income goes to people who live in the local area. Tell us how your organisation contributes to cultural life in Wales. This one is opportunity to get to saying some of the other ones. So what did you say? What haven't you had room to say elsewhere that you want to add here? Because the cultural life kind of overlaps with loads of the other questions. Like if you weren't there again, what would be lost? And how do you bring people in your community together? Tell us about, I think this is the last one. Tell us about your track record of widening participation, particularly amongst demographic groups that historically have lower engagement with under culture, 500 characters. Again, this is one really overlaps with ones what role does your organisation play in your local area? So again, what about demographics? Thinking about diversity in the widest sense, where you haven't made space in that question above to talk about something you do, add it in here. Really very much thinking about those protected characteristics. Those are protected characteristics that are protected by law. So maybe in the question above, you talked about being a venue that has a trans festival or whatever, but now in this question, you've got some space to talk about disability access and how you work with, you know, again, practical examples. Don't just say, we don't discriminate, we're an organisation who works with everybody. Give a specific example. For example, X% of our local community is Black and we put on an urban night, whatever it is, be specific. Those are all the narrative questions with your 500 characters. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the finance things. So Finance information that's actually requested in the form, which I'm going to go through in a minute, doesn't give a complete picture of your financial position. So in conversation, we have been asked that venues submit a cash flow directly to them after you've uploaded your bid. So essentially, you'll use this cash flow to put your budget together for the next 6 months and your actuals together for the last 6 months. And you can then use the kind of headlines in that to fill in the form. And then you will download your cash flow, send it to David after you've uploaded your bid. So this is to help them assess your bid, very much to stop them coming back to you and asking more questions. And it will massively strengthen your bid because it will give them a much better picture of your finances than you can do in the very simple form. So you probably can't see this that well, but this cash flow template is in the folder. It has an income section at the top. You know, we've put this together, so do what you want with it in terms of the heading. So you put in your budget, you know, your entrance and ticket sales in whatever month it is, and it will calculate April to August as your actual, and then September to March as the budget. And in the form, which we'll come to in a minute, it separates April to August from September to March, which is why we've kind of done it like this. So, you know, obviously if you've had income from other things, just whack the line in, just make sure that the boxes in yellow actually add, you know, still take that calculation into account. Below the income table, there's an expenditure table. The blue headings are the ones from their form, which we'll come to in a minute. And then you've got a chance to kind of put in it against whatever it is that makes much more sense to you. There are some interesting headings: organisation review and realisation costs, other activity to build sustainability and resilience. Again, there's guidance in the document about what they actually mean by those things. So you can put in all your figures against your actuals April to August and your predicted September to March. And then at the bottom of the form, what it does is it shows how your cash flow is running. So in the purple box, you put your carry forward figure as it was at the end of February, and then it kind of, you know, works out all your figures very cleverly, as Excel does, to kind of show where you're going to be at the end of March. And it's one way of helping them assess whether the amount that you're asking for is the amount that you need. So in the form itself, so this is a cash, so I've just talked about this cash flow document template is an Excel thing that you will fill in. And in this expenditure section, you will have, you know, totals against operating costs, etc. In the form itself, the online form, they ask you what's the total amount of money you're applying for from the Cultural Recovery Fund. So you will put in just a figure. And then there's a table against costs from April to August and costs September to March. And below each of those two tables, table 1, table 2, is a narrative question. Please give details of the operation and reopening costs included in the above table. For 500 characters, you cannot explain everything that you've just put in that Excel document in 500 characters. So just put your headlines here. So the way this form online is structured is that question, the table 1, please give details, table 2, please give details. So how the table looks is like this. So it's just all of the operating costs in one. They're not asking you in the form to break any of that down, which is why we wanted to supply additional information. There's just a box to put the amount, and then a question, does it include VAT? Yes. Quite quickly pointed out that in operating costs, some things do include VAT, other things don't. So you actually don't need to tick that box. So you actually can completely ignore the does this include VAT column in the table if you want to. So after this session, go to the shared folder and have a look at everything that's in there. There's a document called Read This First, usefully number 1, and that just explains to you what all the other documents are, what the process is, and what you need to do. Document 2 is an overview of the grant, more detail on a load of things I've talked about just now. We've supplied 2 versions of the application form in Word. The document number 3 is with my notes, my prompts, my suggestion, and things that came out of the conversations with them. So when we went through the form with them, you know, Sam and I and Bev were saying, well, what do you mean by this? Is it this or is it that? And you will see in that application notes in purple example where we've got clarification on those questions. And then we give you a blank version so that you can draft what you need to yourself in Word, just download it, do your draft, and then that's what you'll be able to send to us. I've done a separate document about the finance guidance because there's long lists of things that you can and can't apply for. And then document 6 is that cash flow template, that Excel template. And then I put 2 folders in there, one of all their information, one of all their information in English, just the various different downloads and PDFs that they've supplied. So you've got it all in one place. You don't need to keep flicking backwards and forwards with the website. So what we need you to do at this stage is go and read all those documents. Obviously, you're watching the webinar now, and join the 2 Facebook groups. If you're not in the MVA group, although to be watching this, I guess you have to be, but there is a funding group as well, and there's links on how to join that group, the funding group, in the folder. If you have a question that's not covered in the information you've seen, do go to the Facebook group and ask. It has been the most wonderful resource for people because, you know, Sam, Bev and I, Mark, can't always be there to answer your questions, but crowdsource your answers. And do ask the questions because it might be that nobody else has thought of the question. It's a really important one, and we need to go back and ask that question. So if you can't find the information or the answer in what we've provided, you can't find it through the Facebook group, then go and ask Sam. If you then bid your draft your bid and cash flow, you can send it over to Sam for the review process. So as Mark said, we know that from some of the other funds that venues who went through the review process were 3 times as likely to get the funding. Just a little note on that, the review team are there to make your bids better. They won't spend loads of time telling you about what's great about their bid, about your bid. They want you to get focused on improving them. So sometimes it won't feel quite as gentle and cuddly and warm as things from MVT normally do, but it will just be like, this answer would be improved by. So Sam will send it to that review team. You will then get it back from Sam. You can then make updates to your bid and cash flow. If we have time, we'll do second reviews. So the sooner you get your bid written and drafted, the sooner we can get the review team to have a look at it, the more likely you'll be to have a second look at it. When you're completely ready, you're completely happy with it, go to the online portal and upload your application. You have to do it in one sitting, so make sure you're completely ready. The system is not like you can save it and go back. You have to do it in a one-er. And once you've submitted it, as I said, then email your cash flow to David so that they've got all the information they need to assess your bid. That's me done. I'm going to stop sharing and we can come to any questions. I'm going to